Hello class, welcome to Gen Talk Designing Ethical Research. I'm again Jennifer Kalfsbeek-Goetz, your instructor for ATHS 618 Research Design and Methods. So we're going to talk about designing ethical research today. This used to be the first module in the course because it's so critical that you know the importance of designing ethical research. I've moved it later in the semester because I felt like people were forgetting some of this really critical content later when they were writing their proposals, and so it defeated the purpose of making it primary if too much time had passed. Hopefully what you're getting from this is the point that it is really critical that you know how to design ethical research. You can get everything else right, your research methods, your research questions and hypotheses, a fabulous literature review, but if your research that you design is not ethical, there's no point in doing it. People can be harmed. When we do social research, people are always at stake. So please keep in mind all of the elements that we're going to talk about are critical elements for your proposals. So an overview of this lesson's content will include why do we do ethical research? It seems pretty obvious, but we'll make sure everyone's on the same page with that. What exactly is ethical research? You've got to understand what isn't ethical research, probably, to totally grasp that. And then what are the components of an ethical research proposal? This is a checklist for your research proposals. Make sure you're taking notes. Okay. Defining ethical research involves the following: minimizing any kind of risk to participants or subjects or respondents, whatever it is that you might be calling them. I usually use the term participants, but all of the following or all of the above can be included. The risk can be physical risk. It can also be emotional or psychological risk. If someone were to leave feeling terribly depressed or anxious or guilty about something that they had engaged in, you have potentially created risk. So you will be expected to think through all of that. Also, if you're working with vulnerable populations, you need to minimize the risk on their experiences and the experiences of their families if they're involved. And usually with vulnerable populations, family members or guardians are involved. Avoiding deception is critical. If a minor level of deception is something that you want to include, you really have to show that when they learn what you had deceived them on, when they learn the fact that they've been deceived, will that create some sort of emotional distress? If so, then you haven't minimized risk. But overall, we avoid most types of deception. You have to obtain consent. Most importantly, informed consent. Informed is the key word there. We can sign away lots of things, and we've all done it. We get a long document full of legalese, and we sign our names so we can get to the next page of the experience or the activity. Not an option in ethical research. You must receive informed consent. You must, as a researcher, know that your participants and their guardians, if they're involved, understand fully what they're getting involved in. Ethical research respects anonymity or confidentiality. Rarely do we do anonymous research because we need to trace the respondent with various details, and sometimes we need to follow up with them. So instead, typically, we are protecting their confidentiality. It might be that you're able to allow for anonymity, but more often than not, you're tracking your participants through participant numbers or ID numbers and maintaining their confidentiality. As you read a bit more in your online textbook, you'll learn a bit about how we do that. But generally, you're maintaining locked file cabinets. At least back in the day, there was file cabinets. If they're electronic, they need to be protected by a firewall. There are other features that you'll also explain to show that you will maintain confidentiality. Finally, you need to respect sources and past research. So if someone's done a study similar to what you're going to do, you need to make sure that you explain that and give credit to that source or those sources. So what are the components of an ethical research proposal? That informed consent piece. For your proposals, you will describe how you will obtain informed consent, and you will create informed consent documents, Sometimes you only need one per respondent. Sometimes they have family members or a teacher or a guardian who also need to complete informed consent. Every single study that includes human subjects or respondents must have informed consent forms. And if there's reason to believe that they won't read it carefully or they can't read it carefully, plan for in your protocol you to explain the informed consent to them before they sign so that you can be confident that it truly is informed. You need to promise and guarantee confidentiality. That's number two. After informed consent, people need to know that there's no way anyone else could ever gain information about their identity. You must have fair participant selection. We'll talk a lot about sampling. You must be able to show that you had a fair and effective way of selecting your participants into your study in order for it to be an ethical study. We've talked a bit about how you create research questions and their partnering hypotheses. The goal is not to prove your hypothesis. The goal is to test your research question. And if you're selecting people whose responses or reactions in your study are going to just prove your hypothesis, then you have not engaged in fair participant selection. You must also explain any possible harm. So, in the informed consent, if the experience that they're going to have in your study could cause a minor amount of stress, it could bring up difficult things for them to wrap their heads around, it could be emotionally impactful or create anxiety or even some sort of physical distress, you need to explain that. Coupled with that is you need to tell your participants in the informed consent and as part of their participation in the study that if at any time they want to leave, they can quit the study, and if you had promised them anything, it might be $20, it might be a gift card, it might be um, a coupon to get into something for free. Whatever it is that you may have promised, you must still give them that. Otherwise, it's coercion and unethical. So explain any possible harm and make sure that they know that at any point in time, if they wish to discontinue participation in the study, they have the right to do so and they'll still receive whatever it is that you had promised participants, if anything at all. You also must plan to debrief and share the final report with participants. So, with all participants, typically we have 2 copies of the informed consent. The signed one that they give to you, and then they can keep a second copy. You can have them sign it or not. Typically, there's no need for that. But the unsigned copy that gives them information about how to contact you after the study is complete so that you can provide the results of the study to all participants. This is a requirement and an expectation of all ethical social research. And then lastly, and I said it again, I know it's not an additional item, informed consent. So now you know the elements of doing ethical research. Make sure in your proposals all 5 of those elements are included and make sure within them you remember to let your respondents know they can quit at any time. No penalties. Thank you so much.